Some common myths about the planted aquarium that need to be busted. Let's look at some very common misconceptions about the planted aquarium that you need to know. In this video, I will also share with you some very good beginner-friendly tips for the hobbyist. So, let's get started. Some people will tell you to use water from an established fish tank in your new tank. Instead of using dirty old water, use some fresh water and grab a piece of the established fish tank's cycled filter media. It could be those ceramic rings/noodles or a torn-off piece of filter wool. The good bacteria are not free-floating, so they aren't swimming around in the water. They reside on surfaces like filter media and inside the substrate, so adding some old water is a waste of time. Put that piece of cycled filter media inside your new filter to seed it, and the introduced bacteria will start to multiply and perform their magic. Make sure when cycling a fish tank that you turn your heater on, as the good bacteria grow more rapidly in tropical temps. An air stone can also help good bacteria establish quicker, as they are oxygen-loving bacteria, so you are aiming to create an environment where they will thrive in order to hurry nitrification along. If you get stuck on the ammonia phase for longer than 3 to 4 weeks, raise the pH to around 7 to 7.5 with a bit of baking soda to get the nitrite phase to kick in. Once nitrite has kicked in and spiked for a week or so, do a massively large water change, 50% or more, and eventually it will decrease to 0 and will not return. Then, leave the pH alone, as ideally you want it at 7 or below for good plant growth. Also, if you are really wanting to monitor your water quality, invest in some test kits. For cycling a tank, the most important kits are ammonia and nitrite. pH is also important, but only used a few times, particularly if your cycle gets stuck on the ammonia phase. pH, nitrate, and phosphate test kits are commonly used if you are learning to run code 2 and are wanting to monitor your fertilizer levels for the sake of interest and learning. Generally, we always dose in excess to prevent potential deficiencies. If you know you have an excess of every single nutrient within the recommended ratios, then you can at least rule those out as possible culprits when troubleshooting. Series of elimination, in other words. You don't need to use bacteria every water change. Once your tank is cycled, you will never have to dose good bacteria ever again unless you have a massively long power cut and your filter is off for at least 10 hours. It is beneficial to dose it in the beginning phases of setting up a new aquarium, and it does actually work contrary to some people's beliefs. I have noticed though that if you want to see any significant results from bacteria in a bottle, you do need to dose far more than the bottle suggests to see changes in ammonia and nitrite levels on your typical home user test kit. Do not let your aquarium near sunlight. If it is near a window that gets direct rays from the sun, then shut the curtains or move the tank, otherwise it will induce algae very quickly. If you have a fish pond and are struggling with algae, then get some floating plants to block the light, as sunlight is far brighter than artificial light. Expect your tank to take about 6 weeks to cycle, 3 months to settle down and behave, and about 6 months to really thrive. Typically in the beginning you will see new tanks start off with a white slime, followed by brown slime and diatoms, followed by green dust algae on the glass and plant leaves. White cloud bacterial blooms are extremely common, if not inevitable, in new tanks where a species of free-floating bacteria explode in populations before their numbers get under control. Green water will almost always afflict a newly set up aquarium at some point. I'm not telling you all this to discourage you, I'm telling you so you do not feel like a failure when it all happens, as it is completely normal. You can add plants straight away. They will definitely grow, providing you care for them with light, a heater, and some root tabs or in-water ferts, or both. I tend to add lots of floating plants in the beginning to help diffuse the light load, while the slower, more difficult to grow plants establish themselves underneath, like needle Java fern for example, which is a slow-growing low-light plant. Swords are really easy to grow providing they have a root tab all to themselves. My list of super easy plants are as follows: Hygrophila polysperma and its colorful sunset variant, gap filler or mid to back, stargrass, foreground and trim often, Ludwigia repens, midground and floating, Ludwigia arquata, midground, Rhodala rotundifolia, background or sides, Ludwigia palustris, front and kept short, Lysomachia nummularia green, front and kept short, and swords. Centerpiece. Green swords like Osiris require less light than your red swords like Barthii, Rose, and Hormonii. Uruguayensis, however, is a green sword that requires as much light as a red sword. Osiris is the easiest sword to grow out of all of the sword choices. Red swords and Uruguayensis are easy swords to grow providing they have their root tab each. Just make sure that there is nothing shading them like floating plants or a huge piece of driftwood. Medium light is normally enough, but they do not tolerate shade very well. There are plenty of other easy to grow plants in this link here. I have only mentioned the easiest of the easy plants above if you are a beginner and are bamboozled for choices. Do not plant the lead that the plants come with. I do believe that the lead leaches very slowly over time. I have seen moss suffer when it has been in close proximity of the lead, therefore it can't be good long term, and it is leaching small amount of impurities that certain plants will be sensitive to whether we notice it or not. If you want to keep the plants buried while their roots establishing, just make sure your substrate is deep enough to bury the end and they will stay put. Don't rely on the lead to keep them down. It also irritates the roots of sword plants while they grow around the lead. They do grow better without it, as I have seen. It doesn't poison your fish that we know of, but since we all want the best for our aquariums, it is best practice to not let it sit on top of get into your substrate to be long term. It is fine for temporary holding of your plants until you get around to planting them. We'll update this with more info as I think of it.